the monsters, I play 3 copies of Amaryllis. This is for sure a card you want to see, either by milling it or drawing it, so playing 3 copies makes sense. Then I play 3 copies of Titanial. If I were to slim down on any of these level 8s, I would probably cut 1 Titanial before I cut an Amaryllis. But I really like having 3 Titanial just to make sure that when you get this and this into the graveyard, you can banish Titanial or a Lone Fire with Amaryllis effect in the end phase to be able to recur them back with DDR and return from a different dimension. So you really just want to maximize on all the pairs that you have in your deck. And having the 3rd Titanial in your deck actually comes up pretty often when you summon it off of Lone Fire Blossom. And since you play Dandelion, you can easily get 2 tokens in their end phase by pitching this off a discard trap, or just having it on the field and they attack into it, and then you get 2 tokens so you can tribute summon for either Amaryllis or Titanial. Also with trading, you want to make sure that you have enough level 8s in your deck to accommodate for this card. For the other plant monsters, I play 2 copies of Lone Fire Blossom. This is probably one of the strongest normal summons in all of Edison format, seeing as you can get a 2800 boss monster to the field, or other utility plant monsters that go well with your deck. If you have a way to get Dandelion into the graveyard, you can summon 2 fluff tokens, tribute them off for Lone Fire Blossom, to put up a Titanial, and next turn you contribute off the other one with Lone Fire to summon yet another Titanial. 2 copies of Dandelion. Unfortunately, this card is also semi-limited to 2 copies, so we play the max amount that we're allowed to in Edison format. Dandelion is very good with your discard cards like Card Destruction, DDR, or Rageki Break. It is also a very good target to mill off of Gravirose, Card Trooper, or Hidden Armory by just getting us 2 fluff tokens to the field, making our other plays that much better. And for the last plant monsters, I play 2 copies of Gravirose. If you haven't yet seen my video on Gravirose detailing why it's so good in the Amaryllis deck, you can check out the video in the description box down below. But to summarize it, Gravirose is just a good starter in your deck. Its 1900 stat line is very good in the format, and it can easily set up for a lot of your power plays. Next I'm playing 1 Card Trooper. This deck has a lot of cards you want in the graveyard, so having Card Trooper as a starter that gets you deeper into your deck, and also drawing a card when it dies, is really good. I play 1 copy of Plaguespear Zombie, just as a utility tuner that you can send off of Gravirose. And also if you mill this at any point, you can bring it back from the graveyard. And with Mark of the Rose, you can take your opponent's monsters and make a synchro with it. And then what I believe is a must in the Amaryllis deck is 3 copies of Cyber Valley. This card just pairs so well with the rest of your deck. With Hidden Armory, you can search for either of these 2 equipped cards that I have in my main deck, as well as utility for the side deck. With DDR, you can recur back to Cyber Valley, getting you deeper into your deck, and pairing it with Dandelion gives you 3 tokens to use it as a pot. Or with Mark of the Rose, you can similarly to Plaguespear Zombie, first take their monster, attack over their other monster if they have 2 on the field, or just directly for some extra damage. Cyber Valley is also a very good standalone card. By summoning Cyber Valley turn 1, you can bypass your opponent's battle phase, allowing you to get into the long game by protecting your life points and getting deeper into your deck. This card is a big reason why Gravirose is now really good in the deck. Previous to my inclusion of Cyber Valley, there weren't really that many great targets you could dump off of Gravirose that gave you immediate advantage. Now, rarely do you send a Cyber Valley, but you can send a Dandelion, get 2 tokens, and immediately normal summon Cyber Valley and banish it off. So the Gravirose is now really good when you open either Lone Fire Blossom or Cyber Valley. There are plenty more cool interactions you can do with Cyber Valley in this deck. I've gathered a lot of Duelingbook replays, so if you guys would like to learn more about this deck and see how I utilize Cyber Valley to its full extent, you can check that out in the description box down below. For the draw cards, I play 3 copies of Trade-In. By pitching your level 8s, you get them into the graveyard and you get to see deeper into your deck. And 3 copies of Upstart Goblin. Whilst damage is an important thing to consider when you play the Amaryllis deck, seeing as this does 800 points of burn damage each time it dies, I decided to still play Upstart Goblin even though it gives my opponent 1000 life points, just because I really want to get deeper into my deck on the first few turns and get out the early game as fast as possible. So whilst the Amaryllis deck could be seen as a burn deck, I believe it's more fitting as a Titanial control deck. And Upstart allows you to get deeper into your deck and see your pairs faster. I had a lot of issues with consistency in the Amaryllis deck. I tested various different options by either playing Lightsworn Package or even Needlebug Nest to just mill deeper into your deck and see your power cards that way. By playing Upstart, I could comfortably cut the Lightsworn Package, seeing as these already conflicted with the rest of my normal summons, and was often a card I wanted to take out against a lot of different decks, be either Frogs because Delilah was dead, or decks where they can just easily run over it. So by having the Upstart Goblin in my deck, it made for easier side deck patterns. I'll talk more about the Lightsworns and other cards that I decided to exclude from this deck at the end of the deck profile. And for the spells, 3 copies of Miracle Fertilizer. I decided to play 3 copies of this, along with 3 copies of Hidden Armory, as while they prevent you from normal summoning, these stack, so you can use as many Hidden Armories and as many Miracle Fertilizers in a turn that you want. So by just playing all 6, you have the highest chance of seeing multiples of them, which is actually what you want to do. The strongest turns in this deck is when you, turn 1, summon a Titanial off of a Lone Fire Blossom, and on turn 2 you can either Miracle Fertilizer back the Lone Fire Blossom, or the Titanium if they removed it, along with using Hidden Armory to search for either of your equipped cards to just overwhelm your opponent. A Soul Titanial is not that difficult to deal with. A Deep Prison can remove it. But when you can present Titanium with either a Dandelion or some fluff tokens, she becomes a lot harder to deal with. So even if I'm playing Cyber Valley in this deck, I'm still playing Hidden Armory. So the interaction when you take your opponent's monster with Mark of the Rose and banish it off of Valley is of course very good. But you cannot use Hidden Armory the same turn you normally summon Cyber Valley. So if you have these two, you would need to use Hidden Armory first to get the Mark of the Rose, and on the next turn you can Mark of the Rose, take the monster and banish it with Cyber Valley. There are also other equip spells you can play for Hidden Armory, such as Power Pickaxe, which is sort of like a DD Crow. You can even play Autonomous Action Unit to steal a Lone Fire Blossom in the mirror match, in case it becomes more prevalent. And as we talked about, the Mark of the Rose and DDR for Hidden Armory. 1/1 to summon Cyber Valley or Consecrated Light post side. 1 Foolish Burial. So for this deck, you can Foolish Lone Fire Blossom or Titanial, bring them back with Fertilizer. Dandelion to summon some fluff tokens, banish them with Valley or tribute them off for Lone Fire and drawing 2 cards. Play Spirit Zombie to make a Synchro, or the Amaryllis to get it into the graveyard. And for the last spell, 1 copy of Heavy Storm. For the traps, 3 copies of Raigeki Break. I think this is the best discarded trap in this deck, because it is just the most versatile. Against Blackwing, you tend to want to remove their monster or remove their floodgates like Royal Oppression. There are also situations where you want to pop your own Amaryllis, either to burn them for game or to dodge a Deep Prison or Bottomless. 1 Mirror Force. I decided not to main Torrential Tribute, instead I have it in my side deck, because a lot of the time your boards will involve something like Cyber Valley or fluff tokens or Titanials, and you don't want to TT away those cards. While with Mirror Force, you can still keep your board on the field if they attack into it, and save it with Mirror Force. 1 Return from the Different Dimension. Seeing as you banish with Amaryllis in the end phase, with Mark of the Rose, and with Cyber Valley, this card is very easy to get live. And when you flip this, you usually win the game because you bring back Titanium or Valleys and just drawing deeper into your deck. And then the best trap in Edison format, which is Trap Dust Shoot. For the extra deck, I play 1 copy of Armory Arm, 1 copy of Magical Android, 1 copy of Faster, 1 Bryanak, 1 Goya Guardian, 1 Herbalum, 1 Armor Master in case you can steal a Gale and make it with Gravirose, 1 Black Rose Dragon, 1 Dark End Dragon, 1 Thought Ruler Archfiend, 1 Colossal Fighter, 1 Stardust Dragon, 1 Mistworm, 1 XX Saber Gothams. Against Machina, if you steal a fortress, you can Synchro Summon it away with Plague for Gothams, and then 1 Chimeritic Fortress Dragon. For the side deck, I have 1 copy of Shiny Black Sea. This is mainly for zombies and Vayu Turbo, as you can send it off of Gravirose. 1 Consecrated Light, mainly as a 1-for-1 target, but you can also play more of this if you really want to draw it against either Blackwing or Vayu. But I felt this deck has enough normal summons, and this is just another card that get hits by Deck Devastation Virus, so I didn't want to have too many copies of it. 2 copies of DD Crow, 2 copies of Cyber Dragon, and 1 copy of Gorse, the Emissary of Darkness. I like Gorse against decks like Frogs, where if they Monarch me and attack directly with a Caius, for example, and I drop a Gorse, if I Mark of the Rose to take their Caius and hit directly, it's 7900 damage, so it's very easy to get lethal by just Gorsing them and then taking the monster that attacked you. 1 Power Pickaxe. This is also for Frogs, so you can banish their 3/1 Frog from the graveyard, and against Hero Frogs you can also take Heroes. 1 Card Destruction. This is a card that you could have in a main deck. It just depends on how many Frogs Vayu you expect to play against. So this card is really good against decks like Blackwing, Hero Beat, decks that are quite slow and set a lot of cards, so they don't draw that much of card destruction, nor do they have a lot of grave effects. But against Frogs, really don't want them to summon a swap Frog, send a Treeborn, bounce it back, and then you card destruction their swap away for a +1 for them. But it's really good against the slow decks or decks that don't have a lot of cards in their hand, or decks that have a lot of cards in their hand that they need to use. For example, Dragon Turbo or X-Sabers. You can just card destruction away their hand of power cards. If you expect them to have either a Red Ice in the Dragon deck or a Fall Troll in the X-Saber deck, you can just discard it off of card destruction. This also helps unbrick your hands. 1 Torrential Tribute, 2 Royal Decree, against decks like Blackwing or Hero Beat where they have a lot of trap cards. But I don't side this against Vayu Turbo because they have Rikka as well as Caius to deal with it. And against Vayu I prefer to have Skill, and I don't side Skill Drain with Royal Decree, partially because they conflict if I happen to draw both. Also, something to keep in mind for Skill Drain, this does not negate the maintenance cost of Gravirose. So if you have these two on the board, you still need to reveal a plant in the end phase or else Gravirose dies, even under Skill Drain. And with Cyber Valley, you can still banish this card as a cost when they attack and still draw a card and end the battle phase. But you cannot use the effect to banish a monster from your field and draw 2, or the effect to stack a card to the top of your deck. I often get asked which cards I've tested with and why I decided to include or exclude them in my decks. So here are some of the cards that I've experimented with in the Amaryllis deck, and I either chose to exclude them or include them in certain variants, and which ones I believe have potential to maybe be used in the future depending on how the metagame shapes up. There are certainly some variants that are better against certain metagames and against certain different decks, depending on what other people are playing. The most common one that people play is the Lightsworn package, of usually Charge, 2 or 3 Lila, and maybe a Raikou. I decided not to play this. Charge is a very good card, seeing as it mills free, similar to Card Trooper, and gets you deeper into your deck. But I felt the Lila was quite underwhelming. A lot of the time if you go first and summon Lila, she just gets ran over. Her meager 1700 attack points just gets ran over by Stratos, Shura, crashes with Bora, and if you didn't mill anything in the end phase, you're kind of back to square one. If there's an increase of Royal Oppressions, I could see myself including this card in the main deck once again, mainly to deal with that oppression. But as of right now, you don't want to Lila draw trap, and summoning this into bottomless is quite useless. And the issue with this, unlike Gravirose, is this is not a plant monster, so it doesn't really work well with the deck. And you're kind of forced to play the 2 Lila and the 1 Charge at least. While with the other cards in your deck, you can easily take out 1 or 2 Gravirose when you go second, and it doesn't really impact your deck. But with this, either 2 Lila, 1 Charge, which is 3 cards, or none of them, because the Lila by itself is not good enough. Then I have Quick Draw and Needlebug Nest, usually used in tandem, seeing as you can Needlebug Nest into a lot of different cards, get them back with Drill Warrior. This version was really good against the control decks, or decks that don't really play trap cards. So, for example, Frogs in game 1, they have very few outs to a Drill Warrior. And Hero Beat can't really punish you when you go set a Needlebug Nest and wait a turn, nor can they really out a Drill Warrior in a good way. But this just ended up being too slow against Blackwing and Vayu Turbo. And also Quick Draw into Drill Warrior loses to Oppression, which is not something I wanted to do. I tested the hero version. So some people play Stratos, Future Fusion, and either Plasma as a trade-in target, or Dasher as their additional hero, but I believe Nosp is the better secondary hero you could play. Seeing as this is a plant, so it works with Mark of the Rose and Miracle Fertilizer. You can reveal it in hand for Gravirose, and since this is an E hero, you can even send this and Dandelion for Gaia, so you get 2 plants in the graveyard. But I found Upstart Goblin to be better than playing these cards. Then there's Necrogardener. This card is really good to dump off of Gravirose to make sure that you have a garden in the graveyard to survive. But with only Card Trooper being your miller, and not having any of these, you can't really get to Gardener often enough to make it worthwhile. Sangan, apart from your opponent dealing with this on their own, you don't really have a good way to get this to the graveyard and get a Lone Fire Blossom. So your opponent's just not gonna attack into this if they can't deal with Lone Fire into Titanial. So Sangan is just too slow for this deck. Brain Control and Mind Control. This is the only Cyber Valley deck where I do not play any of these. And that is because I have 3 copies of Hidden Armory and 1 copy of Mark of the Rose already. As well with Dandelion, you can usually banish those tokens instead of taking their monster. And these are cards where if you don't see Cyber Valley or Plague Spreader Zombie, they're not that great. Titanial can attack over most monsters, you don't really need to take their monster to deal with it. And I actually tested Compulse for a while. It is quite good against Synchros, which they kind of have to make to deal with a Titanial. You can also bounce back your own Titanial, or usually Amaryllis, to discard it off of trade-in, or to dodge a banish effect on the Amaryllis. But in this version, I just prefer having gas rather than having a bunch of non-engine trap cards to save my place, which is why I play so few traps in this deck. If you enjoy my content, make sure to also subscribe to my second channel, linked in the description box down below.